when it comes to growing your practice, I see three critical areas that you can really work on to make a huge difference in your practice. The first step is really online discoverability. How is your practice showing up in the world in an online capacity? And so can you be found by people in your community that aren't even thinking about physical therapy, right? Or that aren't even thinking about a treatment solution yet. They're just looking for some free advice or help, right, on their problem that they're coming up with. Really, how are you showing up online is one of the key things, that online discoverability.
I'm Garrett Salpeter, and I believe that the most powerful and transformative way to help people recover from pain and injury, heal from trauma, and reach their highest levels of fitness and performance is to focus on the nervous system. In this podcast, we'll share knowledge from the frontiers of neuroscience and inspirational stories of how applying that knowledge has empowered people from all walks of life to heal, adapt, and grow. Hello, NeuFit Nation. Welcome back to the Undercurrent Podcast. My guest today is Neil Trickett, physical therapist, who is someone who has walked in many of your shoes. He himself was a PT practice owner, and then he decided to build the marketing agency that he wished he had back then. So I think he's got a cool story. I'm excited to dive into that today. Formal introduction-wise, Neil is the CEO and co-founder of Practice Promotions, which is a company that's helped now over 1,000 clinics grow their patient base and really improve their businesses through strategic marketing. That was a mouthful. And then he's transitioned from running his own successful clinic to now becoming one of the most trusted voices in private practice marketing. So he's got a wealth of experience that can help you grow your impact and your business performance and ultimately your income. Neil, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Garrett. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. So we've been at many events together over the years, had at least one mutual friend connect us, and you graciously had me on your podcast just recently as of the time we're recording this. So thank you for that. It's been fun getting to know you here, and I'm excited to hear your wisdom and share that with our audience. And can you start, please, by just talking about your transition, from being in clinical practice, owning a therapy business, to then launching Practice Promotions and doing what you've been doing this most recent chapter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually a physical therapist by trade, and graduated in '98 in Florida, and worked, hospitals, acute care, worked a lot of outpatient, and then I actually did some additional training in osteopathy with the Canadian College of Osteopathy, which was really cool, and brought that into my practice. So I started my practice in 2001 with my wife, Amy, who's also PT. And then, through School of Hard Knocks and also business training, grew that practice and learned a lot about business and marketing along the way. I did a lot of schooling in that, pretty much got like an MBA if you want to count it that way. But applied that into my practice, grew that up to about $1 million practice, and then exited that in 2010. And we were in South Florida area. And at the time, we were doing a lot of different marketing in our practice that was working well. And we'd go to like different events, and, colleagues that I had and friends that I had that were therapists, and they'd be like, wow, that's great. Can you do that marketing for us? And we're like, no, we're running a practice. But it planted the seed that that there was a lot more help that could be, used out there on the marketing front. And so that's when we started up Practice Promotions to help a lot more clinics with different marketing. And at that time, we just did direct mail marketing. We did all kinds of print marketing, direct mail. There was no real social media back in 2010. So we got started there and grew Practice Promotions. And over time, we just started to add more websites and then digital marketing and Google advertising, and really just kind of dialed it in with clinics over the years of what worked to be a great methodology for attracting people in the communities and helping clinics expand their presence digitally in their communities. And also tap into something that a lot of clinics don't tap into, which is their patient base, and helping people to come back for care when needed, and then also to send friends and family to them. And what were some of the mechanisms and marketing things that clinics needed to be doing in order to really leverage more of their patient base, instead of saying, thanks for coming in, you're discharged now, goodbye, right? So that's kind of been my journey over time. Had a lot of fun, a lot of pleasure a lot of blessed, time to help practice owners, and learned a lot from practice owners a lot the way. Anybody from, a startup clinic to our largest client is actually 160 location practice in the Northeast. So just kind of learning what they have to go through from such a big entity, logistics and marketing, all kinds of things like that. But most of our clients are usually, uh, multi-location practices or larger single location practices.
That's so cool to be able to take what was working for you, and then once you exited, be able to, sort of copy and paste that for other people. Of course, it's changed a lot from 2010 until, we're recording this in 2025. So marketing has changed a lot. And I want to talk about some of those changes. But also, first, before doing that, want to go back to the time when you were owning and running your practice. What stands out to you in terms of, were there pain points? Did you just sort of learn that market? I mean, you talked about, also going through the school of hard knocks. So, were there other things that you had tried marketing that weren't working? How did you get to doing the direct mail? How successful was it? And were you in there also, were you at different times reliant on physician referrals and then transition to being more direct to consumer, or direct to patient? Like, can you sort of
Mhm.
talk about what your experience was like back in your practice days, and sort of when and where and how these marketing efforts sort of fit into the mix?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So even though, fast forward 15 years later, the same problems still exist in practice. And, I just remember back then it was getting new patients in the door. It was getting the right reimbursement from different insurers, and it was hiring. So same problems that we still have today. And I think that's just going to be, tried and true business issues that we all face in practice moving forward into the future. Um, but back then, it was a little different because even though we did technically have direct access in the state of Florida, I think it was something like we had 27 days. Then we had to get a written, prescription from the doctor in order to continue with care. And most, if it was a Medicare patient, you have to have it completely signed off anyway with a prescription. So even though we would get patients in from referrals, we still have to get them through the doctor to get all the, the scripts and everything like that. But there was a lot more physician marketing back then. It was really about building your physician network, showing why you were different, why you were better. There was still a lot of POPs, physician-owned physical therapy practices that were around, and a lot of networks. But we've seen over time how that's just evolved and gotten, really expansive, where it is harder to get referrals from physicians. It still happens, and of course they're still part of our networks, and it's still an important part of growing your practice, is building those relationships with key physicians and physician groups. But it's very different today than it was back then. So over time, what I've seen change too is the need to be more direct to consumer in your marketing. And as we've evolved what we offer in the clinics too, um, and you're a prime example of that with NeuFit and with the newbie device, is that we do have these opportunities to serve different publics, in sports performance and all. We were talking about it before, diabetic neuropathy and all kinds of different publics that we can serve out there now. So we have these opportunities to go more direct to the consumer. And I think with the advent and expansion of social media over time, the way that Google search has evolved over time, is that most people do go direct first to the internet and to social media to learn about where they want to go for services, or hear from others, look at reviews. If we kind of look at all the patient behaviors, it was still the same things that happened back then, except it was a little bit more word of mouth. But today, you really have to have that outstanding brand and that outstanding presence online, because that's how people judge you more than ever. So it's really how you look in your website. It's really how You look in your online reviews, your Google business profiles, your Apple profiles, your Bing profiles, your social media pages. So people are doing all of their research and due diligence online before they ever reach out. So that's a lot of like how things have morphed and changed over time that I've seen from marketing in practice.
And that makes sense that you would want to have a good presence on your website, because that's like the digital business card. I mean, that's where that's your where people are going to look you up and things like that. There's also this notion of, unless someone is searching for your practice by name, if they're generally searching for physical therapy or stuff like that, getting them to find your Google listing or your website in the first place. So I think there's a little bit of a natural segue here into the topic of SEO and how people can more effectively show up online. So can you talk to us about this, about what practice owners listening to this can do to, if they, I mean, there's a whole conversation there about how to make their website effective, and I think we want to drill down into what makes an effective website too. But even before that, how do we get people to know that they're there and get them interested in looking at the website? I guess I don't know which one comes first. Maybe you want to have a better website.
The chicken or the egg, right?
But
yeah. So I think what's easy as a practice owner is we're bombarded with all kinds of things that we have to do in practice, and there's so many different software solutions that we have to work with in our practice. If you kind of look at the tech stack of our practice today with their EMRs and different solutions and different softwares, I mean, there's a lot that you have to think about and manage from a practice standpoint. When it comes to marketing, I think the best thing to do is really look at your overall strategy first. Like, what are you trying to do? Like, what are the key things that you can work on in your practice? And when it comes to growing your practice, I see 3 critical areas that you can really work on to make a huge difference in your practice. And you're alluding to that in your comments, in that the first step is really online discoverability. So how is your practice showing up in the world in an online capacity? And so can you be found by people in your community that aren't even thinking about physical therapy, right? Or that aren't even thinking about a treatment solution yet? They're just looking for some free advice or help, right, on their problem that they're coming up with. So really, how are you showing up online is one of the key things, that online discoverability. And then as they start to interact with you, as they start to do their research, they will look at your reviews, they'll look at your profile, they'll come to your website. And a lot of times what we'll find is that someone might probably start a search on their phone. So how are you pulling up in searches, and your preliminary website looks on a mobile device, right, on your smartphone. And then people start to do more due diligence. So they'll start to look at reviews. They'll maybe take some time to look through your website, and they might do that a little bit more on like a laptop or even a tablet, right? So just kind of looking at how people look at you through devices is key. And then that would be key to how your website is structured. And so that kind of leads to the next thing, is that you got to realize that your website is sort of your digital storefront. And if you had your physical storefront, if it looked amazing, there's more chance of someone walking in the door. So it's the same thing with your website. The more your website actually speaks to people and is easy to navigate, looks amazing, has all the SEO capabilities, we call that website conversions. So the better your website is at converting, the more people you're going to get to schedule. So you can drive a lot of people to your website through Facebook ads, Google ads. You're spending money to get people to, for example, your website. But if it's not doing its job of actually exciting those people enough to book an appointment, then you're missing out on a ton of opportunity. And an example of this is that most websites convert about 2% of the people that actually visit it into appointments, to schedule appointments or picking up the phone. And so if you think about, if you had 1,000 people coming to your website a month, you might get about 20 of those people actually turning into a new patient. But if you just increased your conversion percentage because of the way that your website looks or structured, and you had some information around how to design it better, that 2% increase would double your new patients from your website. So it's something that can make a dramatic improvement. And some of the things that we do, like we actually use AI to mimic how people's eyes scroll around the page. And then we have heat maps to track how people actually behave on your website. And you can tell how people are scrolling, how they're clicking on different things. And so you want to have the behavior of the people as they come to your website to scroll further and further down. And so having this kind of technology allows you to improve people's behavior on your website, and that ultimately leads to more people scheduling appointments, right, and converting. So online discoverability, website conversions, and then third is patient marketing. So if you've been in business for more than a year, you start to have a really good accumulating number of patients that you've seen. And so how are you then keeping that relationship going with all those people that you've served and turn them into your marketing army? How are they going out there and telling the world about the great results that you got with them? How are you reminding them that you saw them for an ankle sprain, but guess what? We also treat necks, we treat elbows. So reminding them that you have these other services that you have to offer. And that just takes consistent marketing and good marketing. So that could be things such as how are you making sure that your past patients are still connected with you on social media? Are you email marketing on a consistent basis and providing good tips and relevant value there? Are you doing any kind of direct mail to them also as a way to get in front of them? So if you work on those three key areas, that's what can really make a huge difference in your practice. So online discoverability, website conversions, and patient marketing.
That's great, those three. In terms of online discoverability, you mentioned, having content so that people would find your website, find the clinic's website, which to me sounds more like, organic content over time. But also you mentioned paid ads. Is there a particular strategy or mix of strategies, or how do you determine if someone should focus more on one or the other in terms of the time horizon, in terms of what their situation is? How do you kind of determine where to start, or is it a multi-pronged approach all the time, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question. We have to realize that we have a certain budget within our practice for marketing. We have certain bandwidth, because a lot of times practice owners may not have a marketing director or someone who's really supporting them in their marketing when they're getting going. And even clinics that reach a certain size, they should hire a marketing director, but they don't really have someone there. So it falls back on the practice owner to try and do all these things. But from an online discoverability standpoint, what I would suggest is that the studies show that over 75% of people who are looking for medical help start with a Google search. So while it's great to work on your social presence, and there's definitely good things that can come from Facebook advertising, Instagram work, things like that. Start with what's going to be the driver, which is people are searching first for, let's say, physical therapy or chiropractic, near me. So how can you get ranked there? And that you're going to do through accumulation of SEO, AEO, and ads. So the goal is to obviously rank well in Google for if someone's searching for physical therapy near me in your area. But one of the most important things is actually how many times you show up on page one of Google. And so if you're a patient and you're looking for, your doctor gave you a script and say, okay, go find a PT place near you, you're going to type in physical therapy near me on Google, and you're going to look at that page and you're going to say, wow, there's a clinic here that's up at the top, which is the ads section. There's another, they're at the top of the maps. That's another ads section. They're in the maps section, and they're also in that top 10, 4 places. This place must be the best, right? And so there's a much higher chance of them actually clicking on you. So that's one of the things to look from a Google search perspective. It's not just about straight SEO and trying to rank up there. It's really about how many spots can you command from the advertising part of it, what's called the local SEO, which is the maps section, right? That's some different things that you do as well as your website. The top 10 is also where your website pages rank up for that. And then in today's search, it's actually changed, right? We've got more AI that's pulling up data there when you do a search. So that's called AEO, Advanced Answer Engine Optimization. And so there's things that you need to then have within your website that can help you be found in this kind of new top part of Google, which is the AI part. And that comes down to content on your website. So do you have relevant pages? Like, for example, you might be talking about a back pain page or a sciatica page or sports medicine type page, things like that you could have on your website. And that's going to pull that content into the AI answer engine when someone does a Google search. So there are things that you can do here to help out with that. As an owner, simple thing to do is really just spend some time on your Google business profile. That is like the number one thing that you can do yourself that can make a huge difference. And when you, again, you got to realize that you want to first rank up there, but then as people type in your name for the clinic, that's going to pop up, right? Or that'll be in the map section. And so when someone clicks on that, they're going to see your pictures up there. So you got to have great pictures. That's key. You got to look good. You got to show people what it's like to come to your clinic. Is it a welcoming environment? Does the place look amazing? Do your therapists look like they're really helping people? Like, what can you show through your pictures? And then making sure that you obviously have good reviews that are up there that are consistent and new. You want to have, at least 2 or 3 new reviews a month, I think would be a good thing to shoot for in that section. And then having things built out in there, such as the question and answer part. The categories is really critical. So if you offer, say, sports performance and physical therapy, you want to make sure you have those different categories in there. You can actually add some of your own categories. And then connecting things. So if you do like a blog on your website, connecting that and updating that on your profile. So a lot of that you can do yourself, right? And it can actually make a big impact on all your different clinic locations because each should have its own Google business profile. And then I'd say for the other stuff like, website SEO, Google ads, that's the things that you want to leverage an outside agency that knows what they're doing with that, because you don't have the time to learn all of that and figure it out. It's going to cost you way more money and errors in trying to do all that stuff yourself than if you pay someone who knows what they're doing and has a team to support you with that. So there's things that you kind of look at, okay, what can I do from an internal perspective within my practice? And there's things like, okay, what can I leverage an agency that knows what they're doing to help me, with these other areas.
That's like why we would encourage people to, the layperson to seek out a professional like a physical therapist or a chiropractor in the first place, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like, okay, well, I can go to the gym and do my own exercises, yeah. Right? But it's like, no, that's not the same as going to a professional who's going to do a lot more analysis and help guide you through that process.
Yeah. That's a good connection there. So one thing that you mentioned was AEO. I think appreciate you teaching me that term. Just a little bit of a minor tangent here, but I know ChatGPT, for example, uses Bing as its underlying search tool rather than Google. Mm-hmm. So is now perhaps Bing more relevant in that world, or is there any other thing that might sort of change the thinking in addition to what you already mentioned with this more AI driven world and how relevant that is for finding local businesses and things like that?
Yeah, it's certainly up and coming. Google's still king, so that's the area that you want to put the most attention on. You should naturally have a Bing profile and an Apple profile also. Those are free. You can just sign up for them, and it's just like Google profile. Well, you just want to update your pictures and your Q&As and all your information about your business in there. And then certainly, we are seeing a few more searches on ChatGPT. Like I said, Google, though, is still the primary one. But ChatGPT is something where, and then again, this is where, that answer engine optimization comes in, is if you have that kind of content on your website and you're updating it frequently, and a blog is a great thing to do to keep updated content on your website. But, if you, rather than having a page with your services and it just lists out, hey, I do, backs, necks, knees, whatever it may be on that page, have deeper pages that really go into how do we help, treat and improve your sciatica pain, right? How do we help you treat and improve ACL recovery? So having those specific pages, that actually is going to get pulled up into ChatGPT. It's going to get pulled up into I don't know if it's even Claude anymore or whatever they call it now, or Gemini, right, for Google. So yeah, that's kind of the newer direction, and it's something we definitely want to be paying attention to. But content's still a big part of that.
Thank you so much for listening to the Undercurrent podcast. If you're interested in learning more about how NeuFit and the newbie can impact your life, please visit our website at www.new.fit, that's neu.fit, so you can learn more about how it might integrate into your professional practice, how you can use it as a patient, and you can also connect with our team there. That's good advice. So we talked about, website and people finding us online here. You also mentioned, that third key was about patient engagement, retention or re-engaging patients or getting referrals. And you talked about, like, for example, having email lists or staying in touch with patients. You also talked about direct mail to patients. So I do want to, in a moment, talk about whether, the relevance of print versus in a digital world and that sort of thing. But in terms of that, what have you seen work? I know there can be some challenges around having, referral incentives if it's perceived as a kickback or things like that. So, just generally speaking, what have you seen work well in terms of, ways to ask for referrals? Because I mean, that's one of your three keys for a reason. That's been such a big driver. Word of mouth is how we've grown our clinic here in Austin. And, we hear that all the time, that the biggest boost for people to grow is no matter what they try to do online, word of mouth is still king. So can you talk a little more in detail about that third pillar or that third key and sort of what's been successful in that realm of really, intentionally cultivating referrals?
Yeah, absolutely. So that third category, we call patient marketing. So that's retention and referrals and reactivation. So the three R's, right? Retention, referrals, reactivation. So I think one thing to look at is within your own clinic, what are you doing in that category? Sorry about that. So what are you doing in that particular category for retention, referrals, and reactivations? And again, the one thing that we do a lot is that we just chase new patients, right? We don't necessarily think people are going to come back to us. We don't necessarily think they're going to refer people to us, and we don't often put enough attention on that area. But just as you said, you build a lot of things off of word of mouth. And if you have great outcomes in your clinic, if you are fantastic in your treatments, you're going to get a lot of word of mouth. But how can you supercharge that, right, and leverage that more? So I think there's different ways to do that. But the key comes out looking at, okay, what's the strategy that's going to work for you in your clinic, and what can you do about it? I would say first off is, like, what is your way of capturing success stories and testimonials and reviews, and how do you have that set up in your clinic? A lot of clinics, like, yeah, I want to do reviews, and maybe I have some automated systems, my front desk or my phone system, things like that. And that's good. But I think statistically, like 5% of the people fill out a review from an online, an automated software. So the key thing to understand from getting more reviews for your practice from your patients is really, how do you make it a personal mechanism? And that should be something that works from your therapist to your techs to your front desk. There should be ways that when we know that there's a good outcome, that's the time to ask for a review. And it's not at the end of your plan of care. It's when is that transformational moment in the practice, and that might be on visit 3, it might be on visit 6. But when that patient's having an awesome day, like, that's the time to ask for a review. And we can make things simple by simply having, QR codes. There's the kind of like Zappy cards, tap kind of cards in the clinic to, people can tap it on their phones to start to leave a review. Realize too that people don't always have a Gmail account, which you need for Google. So do you have them share on their Facebook account? Make sure you get Facebook reviews too. And then I would say too, like, the one thing that you could do to really kind of stimulate and grow more referrals is actually using great stories from within your practice. So who is in charge of collecting the success stories from within your clinic, or asking for them? So we all know that those particular patients that come in, that had an amazing transformation. They're super bubbly people. They could be the mouthpiece for your practice. Are you taking advantage of that? Right. With their permission and everything, are you getting a video testimonial out of them? Right. Are you asking if they could share that story, on their Instagram or their Facebook? And so we have to have those mechanisms within the clinic, and that's the way that we can really supercharge our word of mouth happening from there. And then once you have those kind of assets, it's easy to kind of share that out there, on your social media channels, for example. So that can really help you with the referral part. The retention part, obviously, there's different things that we can do within the clinic. How are you incorporating marketing and that patient experience as the patient comes in from their first plan, even before their first evaluation? What's that experience for them? How is it during the evaluation? How are we in the visits that follow that? Are we doing enough surveys with our patients to understand, where are they feeling? Do they feel like they're making good accomplishment? And then we can take that information, and that can help us then make sure that we're addressing any issues that they might say in a survey that may not say face to face with one of our therapists, so we can prevent a drop. So there's a lot of different things that we can use in marketing as touch points throughout that patient journey within our clinic to improve retention. And then reactivations is really getting our past patients to come back for care. So what's your strategy there? Do you provide enough value, enough content to your patient list? So we've got tools, and sometimes we just focus on the technology or the media that we're using. So we're just saying, okay, well, I got to do more Facebook, or I got to send more emails, or I got to do this. But you really got to map it out in terms of like, what's the best strategy for you and how does your audience react? And a lot of times people are okay with receiving, multiple emails a week if it's useful tips, advice, things that they could use or share with others. They don't mind getting that stuff. But if you're just bugging them on like, hey, come in for this, or we got this, new procedure, gadget, or whatever it may be, that can get a little annoying. So just got to plan and map that out. And I think your other question was around if we give incentives or, kind of issues that may come up from that. And I would say that I don't think you get really into issues there if you certain things you have from a cash base process. That's fine. As it gets murky when you start to do those things within an insurance model.
Right.
Right. So if you have, for example, with your newbie device, right, if that for you is a cash thing, then you could do like offers or incentives around that for people to try it out, to come in for a program. That should be okay, right? You have to check with your state laws and stuff because that might vary state by state. But then if that's, say, part of what you do with your Medicare patients, that might be an issue, trying to have an incentive to come try them out for that. So that's where you kind of have to just be careful from that perspective.
Yeah. One thing that I used to do back when I was, working with people day to day in the clinic that I really liked. So I just want to share it here since it's relevant. I had a client who I was working with who was, a sharp business guy, and he was trying to encourage me. He's like, I love your business. I would refer people here all the time. I want to see you get better at asking for referrals. And so he actually, got me better at literally asking for referrals. And it was at moments like that, when someone has a breakthrough or transformation, like you mentioned, it's like, hey, do you know anyone else who would, that was awesome. Do you know anyone else, any friends or work
Yeah.
colleagues or anyone who could benefit from that? And he also, a really cool line that I started using during, initial evaluation intake sessions. I would say, my goal here is to actually help you get back faster. If it's going to be 20 sessions somewhere else, our goal is to get you out in 10. And one funny thing is that that's actually not necessarily good for business. So I might be asking you for some referrals so we can get new patients in, but it does a couple things. It sort of, initiates that, like gets them, just plants that seed for them to start thinking about referrals. But it also allows me to tell them in a non-arrogant or bragging way that I'm actually expecting to get them better faster than anyone else can do, and sort of making light of it too. But it's sort of an interesting conversation thread that I kind of like. So I just wanted to share that here in case it's
Yeah,
helpful.
that's a great sharing. I remember in my practice, like it felt really uncomfortable to start asking for referrals, right? It's just not something we could tell patients to do anything, right? You get to that point where you're really comfortable as a clinician. But gosh, asking them for referral is you get like the jitters and feel all weird inside. And then that's what your therapists are going through. So um, the way I kind of look at it is if your therapist can tee it up, right, in terms of like, wow, you're making great progress, I'm so excited with what's happening here, and the patient's like, yeah, this is amazing, fantastic, yeah. And then if they just simply say something to the effect of if there's anybody else that that has a similar problem or that we could help, just let them know. We'll be happy to help with that. And I'm glad that you feel amazing. The way that we get more patients that we can help is by word of mouth and reviews. Would you be cool with leaving a review? So you can make it like nonchalant, and just training your therapist on how to say that with some easy scripts, it becomes conversational, right? Versus like this weird ask.
Yeah. And it does require, that's a key there, some training. So, I think it's important, everyone listening to this probably does have a regular staff meeting or things like that. So if you likely have some sort of weekly meeting or monthly meeting or something. So have some sort of framework in which you can share this with your staff and your team. And then one thing that we did is we had 1 month we had a competition to see who could get the most Google reviews, and the winner got $100 bill. And if we hit a certain amount as a team, we went to Top Golf to celebrate. So it was,
Nice.
made it a point of emphasis
Yeah.
for 1 month. And we have, at the time of this recording, approximately 100 all 5-star reviews for the NeuFit clinic. So
That's awesome.
that's been good for us, and it's something that we have. It hasn't been. It probably should be a more consistent area of focus. Like you said, we need to have that QR code working into more process. It was sort of a point of emphasis when we were doing that. Probably less so, just when we weren't focused on it as much. But I think that's good.
It's a great idea. Yeah, it's a great idea. It's something you shouldn't like gamify, right? And if you run it every single month, it's tough, right? But if you run it 3-4 times a year, that's going to help you boost those numbers, and it gets people in the habit too. And if you maybe have a kind of a running thing happening within the clinic where you might have a monetary incentive or some kind of game, or they get a gift card or whatever it may be there, so that someone can get like an individual response to their particular reviews, because some people are going to be better than others at asking for reviews. But then if you can occasionally run a game, the thing with Google, what they like to see is they like to see more consistent reviews. So it's okay to have a blitz once in a while, but it's like if you went to a restaurant and you look up the restaurant online and it has 500 reviews. Wow, this place must be great. And then you look and the last review was a year ago. You're like, well, is it still good? I don't know, right? So that's kind of the thing when you got to think about from a patient behavior standpoint. Is it's great to have reviews, but consistent reviews actually helps elevate your SEO, and people they're more trusting in those reviews if they're more recent.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to circle back to something that we just touched on several minutes ago. This notion of, you had mentioned sending things by direct mail. In this digital world, I think a lot of people forget about print, but in some ways, because it's more rare these days, perhaps it can stand out more. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're doing, what successes you're seeing with your clients in that realm, and whether people listening to this should consider actual old school print advertising, in some contexts.
Yeah, actually, direct mail works better today than it ever did before because of all the the shift to digital. But I think you got to use it strategically, and where we see direct mail works the best is in patient reactivation. So if you have a decent enough list of past patients that I would say is over 500 people, that's where it starts to make sense to incorporate direct mail into that. So it should be part of that overall patient marketing strategy that you want to develop in your clinic, of how am I staying connected with all those patients I've serviced over time. And I remember seeing a funny cartoon, and it was, I think the cartoon was like, here's the year 2000, and it was, you know, the person was at a computer, and it's like, you got mail, and the person was so excited, and then they were in their mailbox, and it was just full, and they didn't want to go to their mailbox, and then it was like 2020, and their computer was like, you got mail. It's like, I don't like, they didn't want to be near it because it was just so many emails. And then, they were super happy to go to their mailbox, and they had something in their mailbox. I thought it was a pretty funny cartoon, just the change in times. But an interesting story is that if LL Bean, like the clothing
Yeah,
manufacturer, right? The outdoor clothing manufacturer.
they do a lot
So
by
they,
catalog, right? Catalogs, they're big.
yeah, the catalogs, the LL Bean catalogs, right? So that still sent out today. If we look at a mailbox, we still get a lot of advertising, gyms and all kinds of stuff still advertise, postcards and stuff in the mail. So it still works. It works better today than it ever did. But LL Bean actually wanted to save some money. And so they decided to stop printing and mailing out their catalog and just focus on their online sales. Well, they had hundreds of millions of dollars of retail loss in a year. So they quickly put that action back in, because there is very different experiences with direct mail than there is with the digital. And actually, the Canadian Post did a really cool study where they actually did EEGs. They kind of had that mapped on the head, and they had people looking at computer screens. They had people interacting with mail. And what they found is that when you actually physically touch advertising, it has a different impact on the brain. And people are much more likely to actually do something or purchase something or call if they handle it versus see it on a screen. And what they found is that they actually, the highest incidence of success in advertising was when someone saw something on a screen and it matched what they saw in print in their hand, and that caused them to do more or activity towards that. So I think the science is there that people act differently when they receive direct mail. The other thing that you have to look at is, does it fit within my budget, and making sure that you're using it as coordinated effort with your other advertising and marketing campaigns within your practice. And I would say that it's where I think clinics, practice owners have got burned before and they don't believe in it, is because they've tried doing it to a cold audience, like a community in their area. And they think, I'm going to send out 5,000 pieces of a postcard, and they really get like hardly any results. And the thing is that most people don't know why they would go see a physical therapist, for example, but they know they've got a particular pain or problem. It works better for chiropractors than it does for PT and on the cold audience. But I would say the most bang for your buck is really leverage your direct mail along with email marketing, social media to your patient list. And that's where you're going to get the most success.
Interesting. That's a new perspective for me there, and that's fascinating too about the study. It makes sense when you're tangibly holding something, versus seeing it on a screen. That's actually, just hearing that for the first time, it makes perfect sense in terms of my experience. I really love, and I still buy hard copy books and heard of them, and I like reading that. I feel like I retain the information. It just feels like a much more effective learning experience, effective overall experience for me reading a paper and print book versus reading it online or on a Kindle or anything like that. So
Yeah.
that really lands with me just from that experience too.
One thing you can do, like taking that psychology part of it, right? And yeah, I mean the books, right? You hit the nail on the head there. Like you just learn better when you're reading a book, in conjunction with watching a YouTube video, right, on the same kind of topic. You'll like really grasp that concept. But what we want to improve retention in our clinics, right? So patient dropout costs us a lot of money, right? It takes money to get a patient in the door. We want to make sure that we have the opportunity to really get them better. And it takes a little bit of time and buy-in for them to do that, especially if they maybe have a high deductible plan. So we have to sell our services to them even before they start coming into our clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And one suggestion that you can do is have a nice, what I call a new patient welcome packet. So not only you have all your digital stuff that you send out to a patient beforehand, right? Patient forms and things that they can fill out digitally. But if it's going to be, let's say, more than 3 or 4 days out till they come in, if you have a physical packet that you can send in the mail and that arrives to them before their visit, and it showcases your practice, maybe you have some therapist bios in there, it can look really cool and professional. You're going to get more buy-in with that patient before they even come into the clinic. And so you can have these print assets that help elevate the professionalism of your practice and buy-in from patients to improve those retention rates. And that's also something that you can use from a referral standpoint. What kind of cards or rack cards or brochures do you have within your waiting room for people to take out and give to people that they know? So it's one thing to be able to share those things on social media, but it's another thing if you meet someone at work and you're like, hey, I went to this place, it's great, and you actually give them a physical rack card around it. And one cool thing to do is like rack cards on different conditions. So if you have a back pain rack card, knee pain rack card, NeuFit back card, rack card, people will again retain it because they're seeing it in print. It's like, oh, that looks cool. Then they're going to go online, they're going to go check you all out, and that could just help with the referral aspect of it.
This is great advice. I really appreciate it. For you, practice owner, listening to this, I hope you're at least picking up at least one action item that you're going to take from this, something to improve your marketing. And I want to transition now, Neil, to likely the final big topic. Of course, if there's other stuff that comes up, we can talk about that too. But I think there's a little bit of a hesitation, and I certainly have had this as, within a practice, like you talked about, there's a marketing budget, there's finite resources. I think there's some sort of mental framing around expenses or the investment into marketing, getting a return on that investment, understanding lifetime value of a patient, and how, if you understand someone's lifetime value, you can understand how much you are willing to spend to get that patient and what types of multiples and returns on that investment that you need. So can you talk to us about, doing this with thousands of practice, many hundreds, over 1,000 practices? How do you sort of frame up this, especially to the practice owner who's listening to this and thinking like, you know what, I don't necessarily want to spend money on marketing. I think really that's a limiting belief that they're not wanting, because you don't want to spend money on marketing that doesn't work. But if you had a machine where you put in $1 and you just got out $5, like you'd put as much money into that as you can. So it's a matter of finding the marketing that works, right? That's one sort of mental frame shift. But then can you talk about just sort of how you approach this in terms of how much to spend, how to think about the return, how to measure the return, just those sorts of more quantitative, objective frameworks for looking at this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So your practice is a business, right? And so we have to really look at what are the 3 components of that business. 1 is marketing, 2 is operations, and 3 is finance, right? So we love to gravitate towards operations because it's what we know that we do well, right? And how do we run the clinic so that people come in and get a great outcome? Finance, we worry about the billing, right? Are we getting paid, and making sure that we obviously make more than we spend, and all the things that go around that. But marketing is one of those, like, I need new patients, or, I'm doing okay. What the worst is, like, I'm doing okay. But then, the next couple of weeks, all of a sudden our numbers are down and I'm scrambling, right? Yeah. So you're behind the curve.
Let me just jump in for 1 second. So you talk about those sort of three categories or 3 areas for a business. I also, on this podcast have talked about the 3 being, customer acquisition, and then fulfillment or delivery of services, which is operations, and then finance and administration. So same things, but I just want to connect the dots that, I have sometimes used those terms in the past too.
Love it. Yeah. Jiving with you on that one, Garrett, for sure. So we need to put our attention also on how we are using that customer acquisition. And so for a lot of clinics, do you know your customer acquisition costs? because that is the most important metric when it comes to marketing, is how much is it costing you to get a new patient in the door. And ideally you want to be shooting for under $100. And of course, the lower that you get that, the more dialed in and efficient your marketing systems are. So that customer acquisition cost is really simply just everything that you spend on marketing, including if you have a marketing director, their salary, divided by the number of new patients you've got that month. And that's your customer acquisition cost. So, we've talked about those other strategies in terms of actually getting those new patients in the door. And so your online advertising, your conversions on your website, and then your patient marketing. So if you have systems for each one of those, how well is that dialed in so that it's helping you have that lower customer acquisition cost? Now, that is one big part of the puzzle, but it's not the only part. So if you only base your budget off of what your customer acquisition cost is, you're missing out on what you actually need to grow. And so if we're not growing in our practice, we're at one point we're going to start shrinking. And we have to look at how we constantly growing our practice. And for every, people have different goals, right? Some people want to have the multi-location massive empire. Some people want to just be really happy with a one location practice that has a couple therapists in it for coverage for vacation. So whatever your particular goal is for your practice, you got to look at, okay, what's my marketing budget going to be to get me where I want to go? Because marketing is really your throttle for the engine of your business. And you can leverage that throttle to move you as fast as you want and achieve the things that you want. So if you do have that aspiration to grow larger and you want to have more locations, then you need to have a more robust marketing system and level up your marketing systems as you go along, because they will get more and more complicated, and you'll need a lot more help as you grow your business and become more successful. A good rule of thumb is that even the Small Business Association of America suggests that your marketing budget, what you spend on marketing as a whole, should generally be anywhere from like 5 to 10%. Typically for medical practices, that ranges from like 5 to 8%. A lot of practices that I meet are like 2%. So they wonder why they're struggling and not hitting their goals, is that they're a lot of times underspending. And I can understand why, because they often are trying to do it themselves and not seeing the results. So they're like, marketing doesn't work. Or they might be with like a local agency that doesn't really know their niche and they're not really getting the results from that. And they're like, oh, marketing doesn't work. So it's important to look at marketing as what it really is it's an investment. It's not an expense in your business. It's only an expense if it's not working. But if it is working, it produces multiples of the money that you put into it. And so if you're shooting for that customer acquisition cost, typically what we're seeing is 75, 50, some clinics actually get like $30, which is fantastic, to be able to get a patient in the door for $30. But part of that comes from great outcomes in your clinic, which I know that's one of, your fortes there, right? Is the tools and technology to get great outcomes in your clinic. Then the word of mouth that comes with that. And then marketing really puts the gasoline on the fire if you have those other things in place.
That's great. I really appreciate that perspective. And it's good to have that just numbers in mind about what an acquisition cost should be, a goal for that, and just how to do a back of the envelope calculation. This is everything I spent on marketing, including people and campaigns, et cetera. This is how many customers we got in. So I think that's very good and simple. And then I think the other piece of that too is understanding the lifetime value. I mean, you sort of gave, I had thought about lifetime value or acquisition cost sort of as a percentage of lifetime value. I like that you just gave sort of a reasonable. I think the reason you say with confidence you want it to be $100 or less is that you're assuming the average patient is worth, say, $1,000 or something like that to a practice. So I think that sort of went into your calculation, even if it wasn't explicitly stated. But do you think about that piece of it as well? Is that sort of a one?
Absolutely, yeah. So you see a patient 3 times, or 10 visits, basically, right? Just make it simple, 10 visits, and you get, 90 to $100 a visit, somewhere around there. Obviously there's ranges, and, it varies by clinic, but if you're around $1,000 for a patient value that can come in the door, then that's going to help you judge your customer acquisition cost, right? For getting what would I pay to get $1,000 in the door? And then it helps you also then look at those retention, referral, reactivation for the lifetime value. Because if you spent that money, $100, for example, to get $1,000 in the door with that patient, but they only come 5 times, well, I just lost half of that income, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I got to pay attention. I got to put some strategies in place for my retention component and that patient experience coming in.
And there, in terms of lifetime value, just one other piece on that. In our practice, we have some people will come in for 1 to 5 sessions, and they'll just have resolved their issue, and they'll be done, and they'll leave. And then we have some that come in 2 to 3 times a week for 10 years, and at this point they've done over 1,000 sessions, and their lifetime value is north of $10,000, right? So
Mm-hmm.
so then the average lifetime value, of course, is the average of all of those patients, all of those customers. So that's just one little bit of color or additional context.
Yeah, I love that. And that, I think that's a critical area that a lot of clients don't look at, is what is my lifetime value, and sometimes that can feel like a little hard to calculate. And if you have like a traditional PT practice, for example, and the patient would come in for a case, right, a series of visits, and you get them better and you discharge them, and you don't really have any kind of follow-up subscriptions or things that you might be offering there, then our value of that patient comes around the time that they're with us in the clinic, right? But we got to look at the lifetime value then as repeat business, or what they call reoccurring revenue. And that is, if that person has a problem in the future, which they might have the same issue come back up 6 months or a year, 2 years from now, are they going to choose me again, right? And that's where that lifetime value keeps going up if you're good in your patient marketing, because you're going to get that person to come back to you, or they can send a friend or family to you, and that can also be part of that lifetime value calculation. But in your situation where you have someone that can come in on a program, right, for a long period of time, then that becomes even more critical to monitor, right? Is that lifetime value?
Yeah, for sure. And that's good. The distinction between recurring revenue and reoccurring revenue. That was a good distinction there. In terms of the physical therapy industry generally, as we wind down here, what do you think are the biggest opportunities, biggest areas to focus, in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think we're in a big change pivot point now in healthcare as a whole. And if we look at the physical therapy industry, we have to change into the hybrid model. And the clinics that we see that are very successful, like the top 10% of high performing clinics, they have that going on. They're pulling in more cash programs and to supplement the insurance programs that they have. They're also picking what insurances that they take. They know their value, right? They're able to market in a way so that they can get enough patients in the door, and they can say, you know what, we're going to negotiate the highest rates possible and continue to push that, as well as we're only going to take the insurances that are going to pay us well, and we'll be out of network for everybody else, and we'll just have mechanisms where we can sell ourselves better because our marketing and sales is so good. So I think the future of our profession lies in that people are going to have to pay more out of pocket for care, and we're going to have to continue into that hybrid model. And there's a lot of opportunity there because there's so many things that we can offer in our scope of practice, and that's fantastic. And I think you're definitely on the cutting edge of this and showing that you can have these kind of programs in your clinic and then be profitable. So what can we keep adding into our clinic to service people? And we work with clinics all over the United States and also Canada. And I think that the Canadian clinics actually do it right, where they incorporate a lot more service lines into their practice. So traditionally, what you'll find in Canadian clinics is not only do they have physio, but they have usually chiropractic, acupuncture, massage, nutrition. They have this whole sphere of service lines that they offer in their practice. And so patients really like that because it's like a one-stop shop. You don't have to think about, oh, I should eat better to help me heal or get over my, chronic illness. And now I got to go over to a nutritionist over here. No, we've got it all combined in our clinic, and it's a great offering. So I see that the US is actually catching up to Canada in that respect, in terms of what we're offering. And I think the clinic of the future here in the United States will offer more service lines to the public.
I love that. And a few practice owners who have been on this podcast before come to mind. Angie McGilvery and Joe McGilvery in Florida, in Naples, or not, sorry, in Fort Myers, Florida at Apex, and then Jackie Broering in Coldwater, Ohio. They both have talked about how they've added more sort of wellness services. They've talked about how they can use the newbie now for wellness and athletic performance and personal training, cash-based services after a plan of care is complete, and then also have ongoing things that they do more for wellness and things, complementary things like cold plunges and saunas and different, maybe hyperbaric chambers or stuff like that too. That's sort of like you said, that one-stop shop too. But there's a few really examples of people who have been on, also on this podcast who have talked about approaches like that, and I think they're on the leading edge. And based on what you're saying and what I've heard from them, I'm inclined to agree with you.
I totally agree on that. And we have to realize that if you look in the health and wellness space, it's an exploding market, and there's all kinds of services that are being done for that. How do we tap into that, right? Because we are experts in it, and we can totally offer those things within our practice. What it comes down to is operational excellence, but really knowing how you can market those things. And the better you get at that and the better marketing systems you have in place, the more confident you have to bring in different service lines and offer that and be profitable.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's great insight there. If there was one thing, whether we've covered it today or not, one thing you could just shout from the rooftops or put on a billboard specifically for physical therapists and chiropractors to see, what would that message be?
That's a good one. I would say, don't be afraid to try and fail. That's a good motto for marketing, because you got to try new things, and you will fail at things, and you will, blow some money here, but then you'll have winning actions too. And so if you take the chances, right, and you try different things with marketing, you're going to get to some winning actions. And the good thing to do is obviously learn from those that have won with it and look at other successful practices and what are they doing. But I think what I've seen is that practice owners get fearful about spending money on marketing, and that holds them back from being successful. So just realize that it's okay, that you are going to make mistakes. You are going to fail at certain things. You are going to waste some money, but that's okay, because you're going to then find things that work, and you're going to be able to invest in that, and it's going to launch your practice forward.
I love that. That's great. All right. So if people listening to this are, hearing you speak, Neil, and they want to learn more about practice promotions or see the range of services that you guys offer, what's the best place to look you up? Website, social channels, etc. Yeah,
we've got tons of great free tips and advice for practice owners out there on how to market their practice. Our website is practicepromotions.net. I would say that like a great way to learn about some of the strategies that we talked about here today and go even further in depth is with our Market to Grow strategy. You get a free book that we can offer. We actually got the book right here that you can get. And so you just go to Market to Grow. That's like the number 2. So market2grow.net, and you can get our free book and marketing kit sent to your practice and learn more about how to not only acquire new patients, but also how you can use marketing to attract top talent. If you need more therapists or you need, office managers, things like that, there's ways that you can leverage Google to do that. And then also how to attract higher paying patients and using marketing for different systems in your practice. So markettogrow.net, get our free book, and marketing kit sent out to you.
So that's market numeral 2, then grow, GROW.com.
Correct. .net.
.net. All right, thank you. I was pulling up here and I was like, wait a second, it's not working. It's because I put in .com. Silly me. Markettogrow.net. Good, thank you. All right, very good. Well, Neil, thank you so much for coming on here. I took a lot of notes, and there's some things that I am going to share with the team at our clinic here in Austin, and that I want us to review and at least pick one that we're going to start doing, make one change, take one action step based on this. So I challenge you listening to this at home or in the car or wherever you are walking around listening to this to figure out what is the action item that you are going to take from this. What are you going to do to improve your marketing and build your practice? So thanks again, Neil. And thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of the Undercurrent podcast. We will see you next time.